So one of the really big advantages of Google Earth is over here on the top left in our places, which allow us to very easily organize our different plans and jobs, very similar to a folder structure in Windows. So you can see here, I can collapse these down. I currently have a couple of bridges that we've already looked at here, just sort of in the root folder, if you will, the basic My Places. There's the sightseeing tour, which, as I mentioned, came from Google itself. And then I've created a samples folder here, and there's these little checkboxes next to them, so I can turn those off and on from a visibility perspective. I can open those up, and I can turn on individual ones. I can actually even then open up a folder, and I can see all of the things down inside that have been created. All I have to do is right-click on one of these here. I can say Add. There we go. There's my folder. I'm going to make a new folder. I'm just going to call this one TMI. I can add links. I can do all kinds of things. Honestly, I never really play with that. I just want to make basically a new, this is just like a job folder in TM Software Unity. So it actually made it inside the samples. I want to actually drag it up into my places. So now I can move these bridges into that TMI folder that I created. I could even come in here. I could make subfolders. So I could say I'm going to go pin all of the TMI offices, and we'll play with that a little bit later. I can make a personal folder. I can have one that says Freeway. I can make folders based on customers. However it works for you to best keep track of your items. And you're going to see down here there's a temporary places. And when you import a KMZ file, that is where they're going to show up. So if I was to open here on my desktop, I have a couple KMZs. So here's one right here that somebody created. I'm going to open this, and you'll see that it opens it here in this temporary places folder. And if I want to keep that, generally speaking, I'm going to want to move that up here into my places. If it's in the temporary places, when I close the program, it's going to warn me that I have items in my temporary places, and it wants to know if they're going to be saved up into my places. Anything that's in the temporary places folder will be lost when the program is closed. I talked earlier about how one of the benefits to Google Earth is that we can create these folders for different setups and then share them with people. So I'm going to go ahead and clear this one out right now. Show you again how we would go about doing that. So typically what you would do is after you have saved one of these projects, you can right-click on the folder, save place as, and you can give it a name. I'm going to go ahead and save this to my download folder at the moment. And we pull that up, and you can see here that we have this KMZ file. There's the extension right there that I just created. I can then email this to estimating, to the Freeway notification team, to the PM, or whoever it is that needs to see this file. And all I have to do on the other end is download the file from my email, place it on my desktop, my downloads folder, wherever I want, and all I have to do is double click on that file, and it will load that. And if Google Earth is not open, it will open Google Earth. So we can even see it here. I'm going to discard my temporary spaces, double click that file, it opens Google Earth, runs the program, imports the KMZ file that I just clicked on, and zooms right in on it. So it's super convenient to show someone else exactly what you're doing and to share that file. I'm going to go ahead and turn this one off just for clarity. Now you can see here I have a couple different samples preloaded. So the first kind of job that we might deal with isn't a traffic plan at all, but simply a construction drawing, if you will. So this is an example of a very long, probably an electrical transmission line that we were given, where someone has gone in and actually drawn every single pole, or tower in this case. They've drawn the line, and then they've shown any place that there is some sort of a crossing where traffic control might be needed. You can see here, here's the towers. So this is obviously the tower they're working on, and this is where traffic control might be needed. Now, obviously, this isn't a traffic plan. This doesn't tell our crews what to do, but this is very helpful for our PM to then go in and figure out what's going to be needed. This is a pretty simple road, middle of nowhere, one lane each direction, basic two-way flagging. Whether we need to just send a typical with the team or I need to draw that, I can do that. This is very similar to a job I did years ago where they were doing a similar project of running new transmission lines with lots of crossings down in urban areas. So the very first thing I did was to create a KMZ showing the different lines, where the towers were, and then I could clearly see every road that the lines crossed, and I was able to build an estimate off of that information. One of the tools that we have here in Google Earth is very similar to Google Maps, and that's the Street View. So we got this little guy right here. I just drag him and drop him. So I don't have to go into Google Maps to get this kind of view. I can use the same kind of navigation here to see what I'm dealing with. It's a little bit wonky sometimes, but every once in a while, if your terrain is turned off, everything is nice and flat, you can even sometimes see the pins or the lines that have been drawn, although sometimes you can't, and I honestly can't tell you why that does or does not happen. And when I'm done, I exit Street View. It spits me out at sort of this random weird angle. So again, I press the R key. That centers my north straight up, gets me in a top-down view. So that's the most basic kind of Google Earth plan, is really just showing the work that's being performed. So the next would be where we've drawn a traffic plan, but they've used just the basic icons that the program comes with. And we'll get into icons here in a while, but this is a big closure here. It's happening up in Northern California, Walnut Creek. So they've drawn where the warning signs go, where the error boards and the tapers, and some notes here with a big red triangle about something that's happening. You can see the cone lines have been drawn. Now, whoever drew this, they didn't have the custom icons that we'll want to be using as much as possible, but you can see that they've actually used different icons to make it very clear. They've got a little red diamond to try to indicate that that's a warning sign. They've got the non-symbolized sort of cyan dot as an error board, so it stands out. We can clearly see where those error boards are going to be. They've marked the start and ends of the taper. So even though they're not using custom icons, they're using different icons to be as clear as possible. And then they've even drawn the work areas here. Looks like we've got a couple different work areas that they've marked with a pin, and they've used the shape to denote just how much space on the freeway that this closure is going to require. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. It's a little bit easier to read the plan when we use the custom icons, but if for some reason you don't have access to those, it is possible to use the standard icons. But now here we're getting into a basic plan where they did use the custom icons. And you can see it's a little bit easier to read. You can see clearly what's a warning sign, what's an error board. If we zoom in, there's really not a lot of cones happening on this. There's one small line. There's even a cone symbol you can use to denote where the cones start and stop. I will often use the cone symbol to denote where the tapers start and stop, or the tangents are starting and stopping. But you don't want to put 1,000 cones down to try to draw a line. So we typically just use the basic line tool to show where the cones are actually going to be. And then finally, we have a pretty complicated job that someone has created here, where you can see they have message boards way out in the distance. We've got lots of error boards, lots of message boards. We have road close signs, ramp close signs, and you'll notice that they're using different colors. So this is something that people have been doing more frequently. In this particular example, a lot of these colors are actually indicating detours. You can come in here and you can see they have a CMS subfolder. So I can turn everything off except I can go back and see just the message boards. I can come in here. I can see just the detours. So whoever drew this particular KMZ plan really took a lot of time to make sure that they organized their place marks, their pins, their lines. It was very easy for both themselves or for anyone else to go back later and just see the information that they wanted to have. I mean, there's, what is this, 5 detours in there? I'm not even counting right now. So that's, obviously this is a complicated job, and it could get messy if everything was just dumped into one big giant folder. You might do different folders based on different phases or different nights of work. I've even had them where they might be, for example, closing one lane at 9 p.m., and then at midnight they're then closing the whole freeway down. So I might have one folder for what's happening at 9, and then I have another folder for what's happening at midnight. So I can easily turn off the midnight piece to show what they're going to do first. Whereas if I drew everything in one folder, when you turn that on, you're going to see the whole closure as it's going to look completed, but it might be confusing for someone to understand that that's a multi-phase from a time perspective. And then finally, we have the last sample here. And this is one where, for some reason, again, I'm not entirely sure why, but you'll notice the icons are not loading. So everything's just being displayed as a little red X. And that's because whoever drew this plan used the custom icons, but they were in some sort of a different file location. This is, I think, a really old drawing many years back, and for some reason the program is just not loading. Although I will say that I have, within the last few weeks, seen a plan that came in from someone and the icons weren't loading. Now, it's not great, but really, I'm not going to worry about it too much because the person that drew this very clearly labeled every single piece and every single pin. They've got the tapers drawn differently from the tangents, so it's still very clear what's going on here. It's just not quite as pretty seeing the error boards, seeing the warning signs. But since everything's labeled, I can clearly understand what's going on.